Marcus Aurelius once said, "It is not death that a man should fear, but he should fear never beginning to live." Grief. It's one of the most powerful emotions we can experience. The loss of someone we love, a part of our world slipping away. It can feel like we're caught in a storm we can't escape. But what if there was a way to face grief, not as something that consumes us, but as something we can learn from? What if we could take control of how we respond to pain, turning it into strength and wisdom? Today, we're diving into an ancient philosophy that has helped countless individuals navigate the toughest of times, Stoicism. It's not just about keeping a stiff upper lip in the face of hardship. Stoicism teaches us how to embrace grief, transform our sorrow into personal growth, and find meaning even in the deepest loss. If you're struggling with grief, or simply want to understand how to face life's toughest moments with grace and resilience, this video is for you. Stay with us, and let's explore how Stoicism can help turn pain into wisdom. Number 1. The nature of loss and impermanence in Stoic thought. At the core of Stoic philosophy is the recognition that all things in life, including relationships, possessions, and even our own existence, are temporary. Stoics assert that it is futile to expect permanence from anything external, including the people we love. This realization can seem harsh, but it's central to understanding grief. By acknowledging that life is constantly changing and that death is a natural part of this process, Stoics suggest that we can approach grief not with resistance or denial, but with acceptance and understanding. The Stoic view of loss is not one of emotional detachment, but one of emotional preparedness. They encourage us to understand that everything we cherish is subject to decay. As such, grief is not the result of an unjust interruption in the natural order, but a consequence of loving something temporary. Death is not an enemy but a natural companion of life. Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic philosopher king, often meditated on the impermanence of life, reminding himself that everything that had happened to him, including the deaths of those he loved, was part of the greater rhythm of life. He would reflect on how even great men, like philosophers and warriors, eventually passed away, and how they, too, had to accept the inevitable truth of their mortality. When we realize that loss is a part of the natural cycle of life, we can shift our expectations. Instead of feeling betrayed or unjustly punished by the loss of a loved one, we can see it as part of the journey everyone must go through. The Stoic does not suppress their grief, but rather processes it within the context of a larger, cosmic order. This understanding helps reduce unnecessary suffering because we no longer feel shocked or helpless in the face of death. We recognize it as part of the human experience. Furthermore, the Stoic idea of impermanence encourages us to cherish and savor the time we have with those we love, knowing that these moments are fleeting. The pain of loss becomes less about lamenting the past and more about appreciating the present. And ultimately, a deeper love for life and the people in it emerges. Number 2. The dichotomy of control and its role in grief. The Stoic dichotomy of control is one of the central teachings of Stoicism, and it is particularly helpful when dealing with grief. This dichotomy teaches that there are two categories of things, those we can control and those we cannot. The essence of Stoicism is to focus on what we can control, our own thoughts, emotions, actions, and decisions, and to accept what we cannot control, such as other people's actions, the weather, or the fact of death itself. In the context of grief, the loss of a loved one is something completely outside our control. We cannot undo death, prevent it, or reverse it. What we do control, however, is how we respond to it. The Stoic response is not to repress grief or avoid feeling sorrow, but rather to recognize that our grief is a natural response to loss, and that response is something we can choose to direct in a healthy way. Stoicism encourages us to focus on controlling our reaction to grief. While feelings of sadness, anger, or frustration might arise, we are not helpless in the face of them. We have the ability to shape how we process these emotions. For instance, if we are overwhelmed by grief, Stoicism teaches us that we have the power to take a step back, reflect on our thoughts, and choose a response that aligns with our core values of wisdom, courage, and compassion. We can choose to mourn with dignity, to engage with our pain without letting it define us, and to honor the deceased by living in a way that reflects the values they imparted to us. Rather than resisting grief, the Stoic reframes grief as an opportunity to practice resilience. Instead of asking, "Why did this happen to me?" the Stoic asks, "How can I respond in a way that aligns with my values?" This shift in perspective helps reduce feelings of helplessness and empowers the individual to maintain emotional control and composure, even in the midst of profound loss. It is a reminder that we are always in charge of our inner world, even when the external world seems chaotic. Number 3. Amor fati, loving your fate, even in grief. Amor fati, or love of fate, is a central Stoic concept that invites us not only to accept everything that happens in life, but to love it as part of our journey. This idea is revolutionary because it asks us to embrace even the painful moments, such as loss and suffering, as integral components of our personal growth and life story. Rather than wishing that life had unfolded differently, Amor fati encourages us to see every event, whether joyful or sorrowful, as necessary, and to embrace it wholeheartedly. In the face of grief, Amor fati teaches us to embrace the loss, not as an enemy, but as an inevitable part of the process of living. By accepting death as part of the human condition, the Stoic comes to understand that grief is not something to resent, but something that can help deepen our character. When a loved one dies, the Stoic approach is not to rail against fate or ask, "Why me?" but to accept that this event, as painful as it is part of the larger order of things. This acceptance does not mean that grief is easy or that we don't feel the weight of the loss. Instead, it means that we approach the loss with a mindset of acceptance and love, recognizing that everything that happens, including suffering, is an opportunity to grow and live a fuller life. By embracing Amor fati, the Stoic transforms their relationship with grief. Instead of viewing it as a burden, grief becomes an opportunity for transformation, a chance to deepen one's appreciation for life and a catalyst for greater emotional strength. When we accept grief as part of our fate, we allow ourselves to process it without resistance, without feeling as though it is something imposed on us unfairly. This acceptance helps reduce the sense of bitterness or frustration that can accompany loss, and instead, allows us to honor our loved ones by living virtuously. As Nietzsche, who popularized the concept, put it, Amor fati is the act of willing that which is. In the context of grief, it asks us to will the reality of death and loss, to embrace it as part of our life's journey, and to make peace with the fact that, just as we live, so too do we die. Embracing grief as part of the human experience ultimately helps the Stoic live more fully in the present, appreciating each moment and using grief to develop emotional depth and wisdom. Number 4. Virtue as the highest good in Stoic grief. Stoicism teaches that virtue, the practice of wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance, is the only true good and that it is the foundation of a flourishing life. In Stoic thought, external circumstances, such as wealth, success, or even health, are indifferent because they do not contribute to our true happiness. The Stoics' focus is on cultivating virtue, because it is the one thing that is entirely within our control. This understanding provides a powerful tool for dealing with grief because it shifts the focus away from what has been lost to what remains, the ability to live a virtuous life. In the wake of grief, the Stoic asks, how can I continue to live virtuously despite my pain? The Stoic response is not to wallow in self-pity or let grief derail one's commitment to living a good life, but to find ways to embody virtue even in the midst of sorrow. This can take various forms. Wisdom in grief involves recognizing the impermanence of life and understanding that suffering is a part of the human condition. It means accepting the reality of the situation and finding meaning in the experience of loss. Courage. Grief can be overwhelming, but courage is the ability to face the pain and continue living with dignity. The Stoic may experience deep sorrow, but they refuse to let it paralyze them. Instead, they move forward with courage, honoring the memory of the deceased while continuing to pursue a virtuous life. Justice in grief might mean treating others with kindness and compassion, even while dealing with your own sorrow. It might mean supporting other people who are also grieving, ensuring that one's actions reflect respect for the deceased and for others. Temperance. Grief often leads to extremes, either excessive mourning or trying to numb the pain. Temperance encourages balance, allowing for the experience of grief without being consumed by it. It is the practice of feeling sorrow but not letting it take over one's life, maintaining self-control while processing the emotions. By focusing on virtue in the face of grief, the Stoic becomes resilient. They choose to live by their highest principles despite the storm of emotions, reinforcing that our character is shaped not by external events but by our responses to them. In this way, grief becomes an opportunity to deepen our commitment to living a virtuous life, finding strength in our values even in the midst of loss. Number 5. Reframing grief, shifting perspective. Reframing is a powerful tool that Stoicism offers to help individuals deal with grief. Reframing means changing the way we perceive and interpret events. Rather than seeing grief as purely a negative experience, Stoics encourage us to find meaning in it. This shift in perspective helps to lessen the pain of grief by adding a layer of understanding and purpose to the experience. One of the key Stoic practices in reframing grief is the idea of focusing on what we can learn from loss. Instead of viewing the loss of a loved one as a purely tragic event, the Stoic reframes it as an opportunity for growth and self-reflection. Perhaps the loss teaches us the fragility of life, the importance of love, or the value of deepening our emotional connections with others. Grief can inspire us to reevaluate our priorities, appreciate the fleeting moments with loved ones, and live with greater intention. The Stoic also reframes grief by focusing on the virtues that loss can awaken within us. For example, grief might cultivate empathy, reminding us of our shared humanity and deepening our ability to care for others. It might bring out a sense of gratitude for the time we had with the deceased, and a renewed desire to live more fully. Rather than focusing on the absence of what is lost, Stoics encourage us to focus on the presence of what remains, the memories, the love, and the lessons. Through reframing, grief transforms from something purely negative into an opportunity for emotional and personal growth. Number 6. The role of community and social support in Stoic grief. While Stoicism is often associated with personal resilience and self-reliance, it does not advocate for complete emotional isolation. Instead, it recognizes that humans are social creatures who thrive within communities. In times of grief, social support can be an essential part of healing, and Stoics recognize the importance of maintaining bonds with others, particularly in times of emotional hardship. Stoics understand that community is not only important for providing comfort and support but also for helping us remain grounded in our virtuous principles. In grief, the Stoic might lean on close friends, family members, or members of their philosophical community to share their pain, express their emotions, and offer mutual encouragement. Grieving with others helps to prevent isolation and can strengthen the bonds between individuals, deepening relationships and creating shared experiences of growth and healing. Seneca and Epictetus both wrote about the importance of friendships, emphasizing that even in difficult times, we should lean on the support of others. Stoic wisdom teaches that while we must rely on ourselves for emotional strength, we should also allow others to provide their support, guidance, and empathy. This social support becomes a means for reminding us that we are not alone in our suffering, that others share our humanity, and that we can find solace and understanding in our relationships with others. By combining inner strength with the support of a compassionate community, the Stoic griever can navigate loss in a more balanced and resilient way, acknowledging both their individual journey and the collective experience of those who love and care for them. Grief is a heavy burden to bear, but as we've explored today, Stoicism offers a way to carry that weight with wisdom, strength, and grace. It teaches us that while we can't control loss, we can control how we respond to it, turning pain into an opportunity for growth, reflection, and even deeper connection with others. So, whether you're in the midst of grief or simply seeking a way to live a more resilient life, remember, it's not about avoiding pain, it's about learning to live virtuously despite it. If you found value in this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need a little Stoic strength today. And in the comments below, I'd love to hear how you've navigated your own grief or if Stoicism has helped you in any way. Until next time, take care, stay resilient, and remember, you have the power to transform any challenge into an opportunity to grow.